Good evening and a warm welcome to everyone who has joined this evening for the Cinemability Festival or discussion, back-to-back discussion on films that problematize ableism. Let me begin by briefly introducing Talking Films Online. Talking Films Online, or TFO in short, is an informal coming together of academics, students, researchers, filmmakers, and cinephiles interested in cinema. More importantly, interested in talking and writing about cinema. The online group came together quite spontaneously during the pandemic and lockdown in June 2020. Geeta Vishwanath from Baroda and Nikhila, that is me from Hyderabad, have been coordinating the activities of TFO since its inception, with people like Sanjay Kumar, Sridhar, Madhavi Ravi Kumar, Paniraj, Ajanta Sarkar, Murali Krishna, Tarakeshwar VB, Yagnashri, Rasha, Madhurima, Pradnya, Vijay Kumar Borati, Samvartha, and many others who joined the weekly discussions and enhance the quality of the discussion. So far, TFO has organized over 240 weekly online discussions, which include weekly discussions on a pre-decided film, besides a few month-long film festivals such as this one, the Cinemability Fest. For instance, last September, TFO had organized a Kannada movie month where filmmakers such as Prithvi Konanur and Srinidhi Bengaluru and screenplay writer Ananta Shandreya joined the discussion. Filmmakers often make available their films exclusively for TFO members to watch by generously sharing links to their films. And we have had first-time filmmakers such as Bani Singh and Kling Johnson from Manipal, as well as well-known auteurs such as Deepa Dhanraj, Jayan Cherian, Girish Kasarvalli, Adur Gopal Krishnan, Aparna Sen, Anjali Montero, and KP Jayashankar, etc., join the discussion of their respective films. Geeta and I have documented the weekly activity of TFO as an article titled Cinephilia to Creating a Living Archive of Film Discussions in the book Politics of Curatorship, Collective and Affective Interventions, that was edited by Monia Acchiari and Philip Rencius and was published in 2023. During June every year, to mark its anniversary, TFO organizes the smartphone short film competition for students between 18 to 25 years of age, and the winners are awarded prizes. On September, in fact, we have just announced the deadline for the 5th TFO smartphone short film competition. It is soon coming up. May 15th is the deadline for submitting the films for this festival this year. For this competition this year. On September 30th and October 1st last year, TFO organized the first international seminar on Indian cinema in the digital era, continuities and discontinuities, in collaboration with Forum on Contemporary Theory, Baroda. The aim of TFO is to get a conversation going around cinema and to get as many people involved in the process as possible. With the weekly events being online, anyone and everyone interested in cinema is welcome to TFO. TFO has a WordPress blog where all kinds of writings of cinema are encouraged. TFO's YouTube channel is called Talking Films Online, and you can watch some of the discussions. We are going live right now on the TFO YouTube channel. TFO has a private group on Facebook. There's also a WhatsApp group and we are also on Instagram. This is where we share the posters with the film links for discussion, and the Zoom links are posted every week. As I said, May is the month of Cinemability, where we will have back-to-back discussions on films that problematize ableism. I'm very grateful to Samvartha and Aravinda Bhatt for pushing TFO to host this fest on our platform. I think Samvartha has asked us to have this fest a couple of times, and finally we could settle on May when this fest is finally beginning. Thank you, Samvarta and Arvinda, for thinking of the TFO platform for having these discussions. And they've also put us in touch with the students who will be introducing the films each week. Aravinda Bhatt today will also give an overview of the festival and what he and Samvarta as the curators, what they have envisaged over the next 4-5 weeks. Dr. Aravinda Bhatt is an assistant professor at the Department of Languages, Manipal Institute of Social Sciences, Humanities and Arts, Manipal Academy of Higher Education, Karnataka. He holds a PhD in English literature from the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. He teaches European literature and translation, intellectual history of Europe, and research practices at the undergraduate and postgraduate levels. His research interests include literature by blind and visually impaired authors, philosophy, and the novel and disability studies. Through his work, he indulges in his love of books. Today, we have two discussants for the film that we are discussing. That is the English title of which is Champions. The two discussants are Shreya and Adishri Singh. Shreya is a first-year student at the Manipal Center for Humanities, and she's interested in pursuing her major in sociology with a minor in international relations. Her interests in film and media primarily revolve around the coming of age and thriller genres. Her hobbies include dancing, photography, and listening to indie pop music. Adishri Singh is a first-year student at Manipal Center for Humanities who is interested in pursuing a degree in history. Her academic interests also include geopolitical research. Her interests lie primarily in the animation and graphic novel sphere with respect to books and film. A very warm welcome, Shreya and Adishri, and really looking forward to all that you have to say today. And it's now first over to Dr. Aravinda Bhatt for the opening remarks, and then we'll come to you, Shreya and Adishri. Dr. Aravinda.
Thank you, Professor Nikhila, for such a warm introduction and welcome to both Samvarta, me, and of course, not least Shreya and Adishri. A special shout out to both of you, Shreya and Adishri, for your interest in joining this festival. I must give this the credit for uh, organizing, curating this festival of cinema and disability to Samvarta. I mean, this is not an overstatement. I am I'm not much into cinema. Let me be upfront about that. Uh, but it is Samvarta who is passionate about cinema, and he requested me to chip in and make this festival happen. But honestly speaking, I give the credit entirely to Samvarta and Professor Nikhila for uh, putting this together. Also, Geeta, ma'am, thank you for having me on this festival. Um, Let me just begin by uh, introducing or giving saying a few things about the about films and disability. This came into came to fruition because I taught a course um, on disability studies called Social Inclusion and Values to Shreya and Adishri's class at Manipal Center for Humanities. Uh, so um, I invited Samvarta to facilitate screenings of films related to disability and lead the discussions in class. I think that the students enjoyed all his sessions much more than the simply talking about disability and theory. So I'm endlessly grateful to Samartha for uh, um, you know um, um, make introducing even me to films on disability, because as I said earlier, I'm not very conversant with cinema. Of course, I like films, I like watching films, but I'm not a connoisseur. So I don't have, I mean, to be honest, let me be blasphemous and say that I've not watched the great cinema of the world, both Indian, European, Latin American, and so on. I'm your average film appreciator, so to speak. I like some Indian films such as Sholay, Koshish, um, some Rishikesh Mukherjee films. In modern times, I mean, in the 21st century, there are a few films that I like, but I'm not your film goer who would watch 5 films a week or 3 films a week and so on. The reason for this is, and I will enter the zone of disability here. The reason for this is, um, although I have friends and family members who will, give me accounts of what's going on screen, because of my visual impairment, my blindness, I cannot follow visual narratives very easily, be it film or streaming shows on OTT platforms. I have written an article on this subject, which was published in May 2021 by Caravan magazine. I can share the article with Professor Nikhila, and maybe Professor Nikhila, you could disseminate it among the audience if they are interested. So, one subject that I touch on there in that article is audio description. This is the vocalization of uh, what's going on screen. Um, so the gestures, the actions that the characters are engaged in on screen. And Samartha tells me that this is the subtitles actually being spoken aloud. So audio description is a major art form in practice, not just in film, but even in museums and other artistic activities in Europe, especially. You can do, much fruitful online research on this. There are many scholars and practitioners of audio description working in the UK and Europe. Um, so, um, it for blind and visually impaired viewers, watchers, I will use that word very consciously. um, Films are described, and it can be a very liberating experience. So when I shared this article with people, I have a fairly large circle of friends and family members who are inclined to towards literature and film and these things. So when I shared the article in the Caravan, it went to a filmmaker in Odisha. I will not name names here, but this person was incensed when they read about how I say that even blind people can appreciate film through audio description. Uh, so, what is audio description? As I said, it describes the action taking place on screen step by step, blow by blow, so that I mean, in addition to listening to the dialogue, the blind person, viewer, can hear, listen to the film and appreciate it. This filmmaker was incensed because they thought that, um, uh, how can you argue that listening to films is as good as watching a film, because cinema is all about the visual aesthetics. It's nothing if not visual aesthetics. So I agree with that view that yes, cinema is visual, but uh, you know I can attest to the fact that when a visually impaired person, this visually impaired person, in fact, watched films and shows with audio description, I could appreciate them equally as much as the sighted viewer, because of course I do miss the beauty of the visuals, the the movement, the colors, the expressions on the faces. But it's like translation. When you see, when you watch um, the world go by, and people act and people show their expressions in the real world, as well as in cinema, you translate them in your mind, you make sense, you decode people's behavior. In the same way, it is, we visually impaired viewers of cinema, we decode the visual poetics through language. I will give you an example that you may identify with. uh, I'm sure many of you have listened to commentary on sports, right? Tennis, cricket, football. Why do you think, when you can watch the game on screen, why do you think commentary is necessary? Let's say that you take away the commentary altogether. Would you enjoy the game just as much? I bet that you won't. Listening to the commentary adds to the beauty of the game. Why? Because you get to appreciate the intricacies of the game, the ball play, the movements, the strategies followed by the various players, be it tennis, cricket, football, whatever it is. In the same way, listening to films gives us immense pleasure. Okay, so I also will connect this to the artistic phenomenon called ekphrasis. Ekphrasis. It's a Latin word meaning describing art, describing art objects. Okay, so this art form it relies on describing visual art. So this is, cinema, audio description is ekphrasis in action, in a sense. Okay. Now coming to disability studies, there are one or two things I want to talk about here. Um, how are disabled characters portrayed in cinema? We will watch five films, or you have already watched one film, and four more films are on the way for discussion. You will watch these five different films, um, and you'll see how disabled people are portrayed in various films. Um, One major issue for people who engage in disability studies and literary cultural studies, one major concern for us is uh, that stereotypes should be avoided in portraying disabled people. Bad jokes about blind people. You will have seen such films also, where jokes are cracked at the expense of the disabled people. A blind man bumping into things on the footpath, into light poles, into people, etc., etc. Or somebody with a spinal disorder, somebody who cannot walk, who uses a wheelchair. There are so many horrible portrayals of people with disabilities. Okay. um, so, how to avoid the stereotyping, the discrimination of disabled people on screen? This is something that concerns disability studies scholars majorly. Okay, let me give you one example. Um, and Samartha knows this very well. There's this very famous film called Fana. Kajol is the blind character there. She in the first half of the film, she's blind, and she falls in love with this man, and they have a child together. But of course, Amir Khan it is, isn't it? He does not know that um, they have a child, and then suddenly in the second half, you see a completely sighted Kajol, right? She's become sighted suddenly. This happens even in Amar Akbar Anthony. The mother who is blind, she becomes sighted suddenly. these are ableist cited fantasies about removing disability. Uh, there are other recent films on paralysis and so on, which are really discriminatory and hurtful towards the disabled. Now, the films that we will be watching and discussing here are they 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 go on a different trajectory altogether. They portray disabled people as fully human people. Okay. Now, I would request Samartha to chip in here, step in here, and just give brief introductions of the films that we'll be watching, and give some examples of films which um, portray disabled people negatively. Because trust me, I'm not a good judge of names of films, and I don't want to make mistakes. So Samartha, could you please chip in here? Thank you.
Samartha, you want to come in?
Unexpected. Arvind, you should have told me. But yes, okay. So the films that we will be watching during this Cinemability Festival are, I mean, today we are going to watch Champions, which will be introduced by the young scholars, Shreya and Adishri. It will be followed with this biopic of Temple Grandin, a person who is autistic. And then we'll be watching an animation film, A Silent Voice. Then we'll be watching two films, Planet of Snails and Yes, We Found. And the closing film will be My Name is Khan. As Arvinda mentioned, there is a history of what's a bad representation of disability. Usually, it's either seen as something which is actually kind of a pitiable thing, or there is another whole thing that which actually, I mean, Arvinda keeps mentioning about is the representation of disabled people as super crips, people who are highly achieving, inspiring. So either, I mean, to actually borrow terms which Arvinda uses in his classes, is often either it becomes a pity porn or it becomes an inspiration porn. But
Inspirational porn.
Inspirational porn, yeah, I stand corrected. Thanks, Arvinda.
Sorry.
So, no. So these are the major, let's say, problems with representation. And but over a period of time, I think, in the history of cinema, that's how it actually kind of begins. Over a period, things actually kind of begin to change. And I mean, the it's very interesting as to how actually disabled people start to become a part of cinema. It's that some major stars in Hollywood, they actually kind of meet with an accident and they become disabled, and the industry does not want to actually kind of lose them because they are stars. Okay. And hence, for very commercial reasons, actually, Hollywood begins to weave narratives around disability so that they can retain these actors. I think, that's how it actually kind of begins and it starts taking shape. Uh, Narratives which are sensible and sensitive towards a disability with a certain consciousness actually kind of begin to emerge. And as Arvinda mentioned, this entire, the film festival idea came as an offshoot of the class that Arvinda was handling, where actually Shreya and Adishri were there, and I happened to be there. And we had to choose films which, we did not want to just actually kind of, get trapped in the conversation just around representation. We just wanted to open it up. So hence, even when actually, Nikhila probably grasped it very, rightly, and it was not actually kind of, the festival is not called as a problematizing representation. It's actually problematizing, ableism. So yeah, that's the whole larger, vision with which we actually kind of, had these films in the class, and as expected, the conversations actually kind of widened, I think my understanding around cinema, and also disability. It helped me learn a lot. And also, I think, And hence, actually, I mean, while actually, I mean, the conversation began with Nikhila said, okay, maybe, I mean, the students should present. And luckily, thanks to TFO for making this happen. So, I mean, that's all I actually have to say. I mean, now probably, I mean, we can pass the mic to Shreya and
May I say
Adishri.
one thing before
Yes,
we?
yes, yes, certainly, certainly. I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing, two things I want the people, the cinema buffs, the cinema connoisseurs who are online today, attend this meeting to be aware of this. We people with disabilities would like to see cinema, films, filmmakers cast disabled people as characters, not make able-bodied people play the roles of disabled people, like Margarita with a straw, for instance, but disabled people themselves being trained in acting and made being cast in roles in cinema, both as disabled people and as characters in their own rights. Right. Okay. This is one thing. And also, in disability studies, we say that disability is all pervasive, it is ubiquitous. If you examine novels and poems and drama, plays from like the last several centuries across the world, you will see disabled characters being portrayed in different genres and literary works. In the same way, can you think back on the great cinema of India, of Europe, say Satyajit Ray, Ritvik Ghatak, the various European filmmakers, um, Bergman, whoever, Tarkovsky, Victor Shklovsky, all these people, they're great films. Can you think of characters who whom you knew that that they were different, but now that you are thinking about disability, can you identify disabled characters in the great cinema of the world? Think about this. This is something you might be interested to follow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aravinda and Samvartha, for giving us an overview of how this happened. Now we'll turn to this week's film, and to initiate discussion on this week's film, we have Shreya and Adishri. So it's over to Shreya probably, who will go in first. And then we'll open it out for discussion. Over to you, Shreya.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I hope I'm audible and clear to everybody. Before we start, I would just like to give a quick thank you to everybody involved. Thank you to Nicola ma'am for organizing this, and even Geeta ma'am for creating this initiative after having listened to everything that you guys do and for however long you've been doing it for. I think it's very, very creative and very interesting for people to come together and sort of talk about films in a way like this. And thank you to Samartha sir and Ajanda sir. We've had multiple interactions in class while watching these movies, and I think this initiative too was really interesting for just us to see how there exists different perspectives on films, probably from a more academic view than the thematic sort of discussions that we're used to. So excuse us if our discussions and our points of discussion are mostly related to the themes and broader themes of social commentary that the film sort of talks about. So yeah, Adishri will introduce the film briefly, and then we'll sort of talk about the discussion topics that we encountered while talking about the movie in class. And then I think we'll open it up for broader discussion with everyone in this meeting.
Yeah, hello. I hope I'm audible. So I'm Adishri, as Shez introduced me, and so is Arvinda, and so is Nicola. Thank you very much for that, by the way. So just to give you a brief sort of overview of the movie, Champions, or Campeones, I hope I pronounced that right. It's a 2018 Spanish film by Javier Fesse, and it became Spain's official Oscar submission and one of the most successful films in the last few years. It follows the story of Marco, who's a basketball coach and is sort of quote unquote sentenced to train a team of players with intellectual disabilities. And what makes this film especially powerful is that a lot of the casting is non-professional actors with disabilities, which is something that Arvind also discussed. There's a certain aspect of representation within the movie in its making as well, not just the story. We first watched Champions in our social inclusion and values module for EDC and MCH with Arvinda, and I think it sparked one of our most interactive discussions. It was also one of our first discussions. And though we did look at it majorly from the perspective of disability studies, there was a lot of thematic aspects that we like sort of the aspects in its form as well as the thematic aspects of it that we went into, which Shreya and I will be covering. Yeah, Shreya, over to you.
Okay, so talking about, I mean, as Adishi said, it was one of the most interactive classes that we had. I remember all of us sitting in a circle and sort of going order by order, and most of us had different points to share, some of which I would like to bring up now. We obviously analyzed the individual character arcs and individual stories that most of the characters had to share. Obviously, other than Marco, I think one of the key points that we kind of spoke about is how in the film, the identity of the individuals or the basketball players wasn't just their disability. They also had occupations, and they also had their own personal lives. And we see many scenes that talk about them dealing with their own fears. So it was all very much so branched out and not sort of singled upon the fact that they are disabled or have to sort of struggle, quote unquote, with disability, which is what some films end up doing, which leads to a problem of misrepresentation or poor representation. Apart from that, we also discussed how comedy as a genre was sort of used to portray this movie. Like Arvinda said, most films also have jokes that are made about the characters with disability, but over here there was still laughs from the audience. It was still an enjoyable sort of experience to keep up with the narrative and the storyline, because the jokes weren't sort of made on their disability, or they weren't made about a person's lack of understanding or anything. It simply came through within the narrative and within the storyline, and how they were able to portray it off of characters that you wouldn't really expect to make jokes about in a film like this. So I think that was the use of comedy as a tool in very strategic points of the film, I think was a point that many people brought up in class. And I think coming back to the point about identity, it also shows how it's not just the protagonist who kind of has agency within the whole film, even though you sort of see most films with the protagonist sort of everything happening from their perspective or their point of view. Over here, you're sort of you can get an insight into different people's lives, which brings together the whole circular narrative of how it sort of starts and how it ends as a team, talks about themes of togetherness and talks about themes of responsibility, and how different characters have different fears that are eventually overcome. Even Marco, who, for example, didn't want to have children in the beginning, which caused a rift in most of his relationships. But towards the end of the movie, we see that big change as one of his major character arc changes. So I think even there was a lot of cultural and social commentary that obviously most films about disability bring, but this wasn't more so in a this has to be done or this, that kind of way. It was more so open to anyone who would like to watch, and it was a very general discussion about disability while simultaneously highlighting different facts and different aspects of each individual who had a certain form of disability. Yeah, so as one of the points is also, as Arvinda mentioned, about representation and who was being cast, and the existence of stereotypes that existed in different societies and how those were broken in not sort of direct ways. And even the whole way that each relationship that a person had with the coach, so with the coach who was Marco, and each relationship that he had with a different player, and the differences in communication with each player was something that had to be, that we all found very interesting to note. And yeah, personally, the point that I raised was mostly to do with his sort of character arc, because that was very interesting to watch towards the end, how he was portrayed as someone who wasn't a man of many, I mean, soft emotions, or, was angry and was judgmental and things like that. But using sports as a medium, using a physical game, or using a sports team as sort of a guiding light to ending up as a completely different person who is now able to take up responsibilities in his own life and in other people's life, I think was very important, because that also drew away from the fact that Marco wasn't to be seen as a savior. He didn't necessarily a savior to the people who were disabled, more so a savior to himself. He There were different events in his life that happened within the course of this basketball team that changed his perspective on multiple things. So that is also another one stereotype that some films with disabilities like to portray, where they have to fix the disability, or they have to cure this disability, or people need specific attention and help to deal with the disability. So I think this kind of took a huge step back from that and looked at how the protagonist in himself was flawed. And yeah, those were the points that were brought up by different people in class. And I think we were able to come up with a cohesive sort of view on identity, agency, narratives, and dramedy or comedy and drama as a genre. Now I'd like to pass on the mic to Adushi, who has a couple of more specific themes that she'd like to talk about that I think are very interesting.
So just to piggyback off of what Shreya discussed, I think the idea that Marco was in some way not the savior, but rather a lot of the times the fact that the movie is a comedy, dramedy, he was at the butt of the jokes. He was the enable, and he was the one who was sort of the conflicted. So he was the flawed protagonist, which I feel is really unique, especially like Arvinda discussed in a lot of these movies that discuss the disabled or the physically unable, or like a lot of those words that we use have this sort of rhetoric of overcoming overcoming your disability. And something that I found really unique, and also the idea that we sort of really understood the movie via the subtitles, was the use of language. Language in the film is more than just a communicative tool. It's a structuring force that determines who belongs and who is excluded. Language in Champions specifically functions both as a literal barrier and as a symbolic marker of an in-group and an out-group identity. And I think though this does speak a lot about the context of the able-bodied, and how when Marco sort of went into this experience, he had a lot of he had a lot of thoughts on what their sort of inability looks like, and how they aren't complete, or they aren't sort of good enough to be part of a team. But really, he was the one who had the most sort of overcoming throughout the movie. Like, I'd say he had the most circular as well as, I guess, complete character arc, where everyone else was in pretty stable jobs. They had their social lives pretty figured out. It was Marco who was sort of the unable. The linguistic divide plays out, I think, the first sort of interaction I had with it was on the basketball court, where Marco's professional jargon, laden vocabulary like run a pick and roll or rotate on defense, was sort of it used to alienate the players. But I think what's really unique about this is it wasn't just the players that were alienated, but it was also the viewer. Because personally, I didn't really have a lot of background on the basketball jargon, so I also felt like I was alienated, and there was a certain level of confusion on my part as well. And there were other scenes where he would give them instructions, and they wouldn't necessarily be followed, but it was more a problem on Marco's part and his ability to communicate rather than their ability to understand. And I feel like that gap that is normally like that's something that we don't necessarily understand the experience of the disabled. It's more so it bridges the gap between us and the people in the movie, where I was able to understand, okay, this is where the gap was, and really it was Marco and his inability to communicate. The confusion is not about ability, but rather access. They are being excluded by a specialized register that presumes shared knowledge that they've never been offered. And I feel like this dynamic reflects broader societal structures and practices in which people with disabilities are not empowered through inclusive language, but instead disciplined through labels that signal their like supposed incapacity to participate fully. And I think the most obvious one was the use of slurs and how he didn't really have the context. So there was a lack of understanding on both the disabled and the able parts, where in some ways you could assume that Marco was sort of the disabled. Language also becomes a sort of site of reclamation and resistance in the movie, where at one point Johnny describes himself as the homie with an extra crowy, and I think that's pretty funny for me, because normally you'd look at that as an insult, but there's a certain reclamation of it, and who says it and when they say it is also quite important. Through humor and pride, they shift this sort of framework from a context of pity to agency. And similarly, the players and their inside jokes, catchphrases, and sort of their unique expressions from their own verbal communities, there's a space of belonging that stands in contrast to the outsider language of diagnosis and deficit that's normally attached with disability. So this alternative linguistic sphere that's formed within the movie not only challenges dominant assumptions about communication, but it also asserts a counter discourse rooted in play, identity, and solidarity. I also think, moreover, I think the film critiques the way language is often put on the people with disabilities in a sphere of inability. Like I mentioned previously, terms like handicapped or even special needs are loaded with euphemistic pity, and they operate less as descriptors, but more as boundary markers, where there's an us who is the able and them, the incapable. And these terms imply a need for skill and social context, but Champions has the ability to show that what the team lacks is not competence, but communicative inclusion. And once Marco learns to listen, adapt, and speak with the team rather than sort of force this rhetoric of inability, is really when the team comes together. So are they really disabled, or is it just the context and our creation of this sphere of linguistic sort of identities that makes them disabled? Yeah, I think we can open the forum for discussion now.
Yeah, that's mostly what we had to talk about thematically, and what we were able to contribute in class and over here. I think first impressions of the movie would be the most simple sort of form for discussion. So if there was any specific scene that somebody enjoyed, or anything that what we said kind of resonated with what you also thought of the movie, that would be great to open up.
Yeah, thanks, Shreya and Adishri. That was very competently presented. We'll open out the film now for discussion. Anyone who wants to come in, please let me know if you want to speak by unmuting so that I can turn to you. Anyone who wants to begin at the outset? Okay, while people gather there. Yeah, Geeta, please go ahead.
No,
Yeah,
please
go
go
ahead.
ahead, Nikhila.
No,
Sorry.
No, I was just
Okay.
trying to fill in. Please go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for introducing this film to all of you, and also for suggesting it for me, because I was not familiar with this film. I immediately thought of Chak De, India, and these kind of films came to mind while watching it, and I don't know whether I did the right thing, but I also laughed a lot during the film because many scenes were really funny, but what was different was it was like not laughing at them, but laughing along with them. So I thought that was a big difference. And another thing is, at one level, it was a predictable narrative. I know, in the sense that you could tell that, okay, they are going to, come out as champions at the end of it, even if they technically lose the match, or, they're going to be some kind of, moral preachers to the to the coach, because the coach, the able-bodied, able-minded coach has been put in the role of, coaching these people who are supposed to be intellectually deficit. But the reverse is what happens, they are the ones who end up coaching the coach. So these seemed predictable, but at the same time, I thought it was all very beautifully done. There was humor, there was sentiment. It was quite sentimental in parts, and so all in all, the viewing experience was really good, I thought.
Yeah, thanks, Geeta. Thanks
Hello,
for
Nikhila, may I?
yeah. Please go ahead, Arvinda. Yeah.
No. I hope I'm not hogging the the time.
No,
No,
not
no,
at all.
please
Not
go
at all.
ahead.
Please go ahead. Most
No, I
welcome.
mean I don't have anything profound to say, but the thing is, I would like people here who to also consider if the film champions, and later on as well, this stands for the other films too. See, cinema is about the shots, the cinematography, the how the camera moves, how the picture, the shots are taken, how the editing happens. These are all very important things for the narrative of film, right? So it would be interesting to see these various films that have the themes of disabilities, various disabilities, whether they actually do well even as cinema, as the art form itself. As Geeta brought it out, many a time what happens with these socially conscious films is they become didactic, they become preachy in some way or other. But films about other subjects, like with where disability is not the main theme, they usually succeed as film. I mean, take the Apu trilogy or um, Strawberries, I think Bergman's, uh, and other films, many other films, the Decalogue or whatever, Kishlovsky. So these films, they succeed as cinema, right? The art of cinema itself. So do the other films here? So over this May 2025, it would be nice to hear from the cinema, the film buffs, the film connoisseurs, if if anything, you know, tick, if anything moves you for its own filmic or cinematic beauty. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else who wants to come in at this point? Please unmute yourselves. Yes, Murli Krishna, please go ahead.
Yeah, good evening all. Hope I'm audible.
Yes,
Thanks,
yes, you are. Yeah.
thanks, Dr. Arvind Bhatt and also Samvartha Sahil, for actually making a provision, or rather making us to watch these films under the cineability category. And also two young scholars, Adhishi Singh and Shreya Rao, made a very good presentation of this film. Some two or three quick points here. I think every human being has her, him or her has dysfunctions. And if you take the film in this regard, Marcus, no, his name is Marcus. Uh, Family is also a dysfunctional family. So, in fact, no human being is perfect, and this has come across in the film. Point number one. Point number two is the depiction of characters are not made from the angle of victimhood. That's very important. Normally, in many films, we see these types of characters portrayed from the angle of victimhood. That's not there in this film. And the film is very lively, very lively. And these are some of the points that came across to my mind. If there are any, I will talk about them later, if time permits. Thank you.
Thank you, Murli Krishna sir, for your comments on the film. Anyone else would like to come in now?
Yeah, can I ask?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, thankful for a very thoughtfully curated session, that brings attention to cinemability and the importance of disability representation in the, global cinema. We see a lot of those kind of movies happening in our this thing, but, to see what is happening in the global cinema also. But this film actually offers a very refreshing alternative, to dominant cinematic narratives by foregrounding characters with intellectual disabilities. However, this also invites deeper inquiry into questions of authorship and narrative structure. If you see, Um, I was just thinking, uh, the film which also deserves recognition for bringing neurodivergent characters into the center of mainstream sports narrative, and for employing actors with intellectual disabilities, thus pushing the envelope on inclusive casting. So I have few, but while watching this movie, I just had few questions actually. So in what ways does this film succeed or fall short, in granting narrative agency to its disabled characters, particularly when we see the story is largely structured around the personal growth of able-bodied coach? To what extent does this framing risk, perpetuating a saviorist narrative, even as it seeks to change normatic cinematic representation of disability? And see, the use of comedy to explore disability is a bold and nuanced choice, I feel. But it humanizes characters, and also it defies melodramatic portrayals often seen in disability cinemas. So when we look at in that angle, to what extent does this comedic framing of this movie function as a strategy for normalization that invites empathetic engagement? Alternatively, does it risk diluting the structure and everyday challenges faced by disabled individuals for the sake of audience comfort and narrative resolutions? How might we evaluate this balance from the standpoint of ethical aesthetics? So these are the few things which came to my mind. I thought, it will be, we can discuss this in the forum.
Okay, wonderful questions. Anyone, Aravinda, Samvartha, or Shreya or Adishri, any responses to Dr. Madhavi's questions? Some really great questions here, thought-provoking. Also asking us to not be as celebratory of the film as we initially thought of it. Any responses? Would anyone want to comment? Shreya, do you want to say something?
Yeah, we brought up a similar point. I think with respect to Sonia's character, I think we in class when we had a discussion, we noticed that Sonia's character wasn't given as narrative agency, and also the point that Madhavi ma'am raised about comedy being used to make it seem comfortable to the audience to watch. I think that was also a point that one of our friends raised in class, and that we also kind of agree with, because I mean, if I may take the example of one of the other films that is going to be screened later, I won't obviously describe the whole plot for it, but there will definitely differences in the genres that made this a comfortable watch and that slightly uncomfortable, which I think we'll be able to notice within the course of this month and the different kinds of genres that each film sort of talks about. But I also agree that comedy does bring in comfort. But I think that it's also a way that it's a very conscious decision that this film is choosing to make in sort of adopting that genre and sort of centering it around that genre. So they don't really portray it to be something else and sort of misdirect it into making it a comedy and just to make it more accessible. I think it's meant to be a comedy and they sort of did justice to it, if that kind of makes sense. And how that sort of came off to the audience. Like Geeta ma'am also said that she, found herself laughing at different parts of the movie, which we sort of feel a bit conflicted about because of the serious themes that it often deals with. But then again, I think the accessibility to large number of people and the sort of comfort is something that they want from us as the audience while watching the film, while also being able to understand that these are the kinds of jokes that flow within the narrative and don't sort of fall on the characters that are disabled. So I think that's another way to look at, that's how at least I perceived the use of comedy as a genre in this film.
Just to add on to that, part of what you asked was, is it a little? I think it is a big question. Why is a movie which discusses sort of disabilities centered around the life of the able-bodied? But I think it's really, I think that's a really important perspective to have. Why is it that a lot of the times in movies that do discuss disability, why is it centered around an incomplete protagonist where a lot of the times the disability is what you're overcoming? And I feel like by decentralizing sort of the disabled and making the able-bodied incomplete, you're completely changing the narrative. Again, it's a perspective, but I do think it was quite important for a lot of the humor and a lot of it to be centered around the able-bodied, because as you can see, a lot of it, like, even though it wasn't central to it, a lot of the disabled or like the intellectually disabled in the movie, they had very complete, what you would consider complete lives, if that makes sense. And I think that's a really important narrative to show, especially if the canon of what the context of within which the disabled is perceived and shown is always that of you overcome some sort of disability and you're living in a constantly sort of incomplete life. You're incomplete as long as you have your disability. To shift that narrative, I think, is quite important. And that's one of the main reasons that, like, yes, it is predictable in nature. Like, you could really tell the plot points and you could really tell what was going to happen in the end. But I think the fact that it plays on a pre-existing canon, but it completely flips it in who is able and who is disabled by removing that context or by removing that narrative of incompleteness and shifting it from the disabled to the able-bodied, I feel is quite important. Yes, I hope that answered your question. I hope we were able to answer your question.
May I chip in here?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, two or three things to say. I think the question that Madhvi ma'am raised is superb. I had not even thought of the narrative centering of the able-bodied, but um, I wanted to say a couple of things here. One, what happens with people with persons with disabilities is that their disabilities become the most important parts of their identities. The persons are reduced to their disabilities. Okay, so I am first, according to the world, the society, I'm first blind and disabled, and then later I am the other things that I am. Okay, I think perhaps I could be wrong. I don't know. Maybe Samvarta could correct me here. Uh, I think by not making the disabled one or the various disabled characters the centers of the narratives, I think this is one way to stop that reduction from happening. Okay, so if the disabled person was to be made the center of the narrative center, the narrator of the film in a sense, maybe then their disability would have dominated the storyline. The second thing is that uh, the this is quasi or even, let's say, didactic in a sense. How does an able-bodied person read Marco, come to appreciate the disabled people whom he first despises? He says, "No, do you want me to coach? Like the uh, uh, you know." the idiots or something like that. I forget the exact word he uses there. And how he comes to change his view and view them as persons in their own rights. I think this is what the director, the script writer wants to show. So it is didactic, but it is also important because many able-bodied people in this world, in our societies, various societies, they never have ever interacted with disabled people truly as persons. You know, when we think of disabled people, people with various disabilities, we see them through various stereotypes. Somebody who is who uses a wheelchair is wheelchair bound, confined to a wheelchair. You know, these are the words that we use, right? We think, and it is very hard to actually imagine disabled lives of people with disabilities as full persons. So I suppose, I don't know, I suppose in making Marco the narrative center of the film, these are some of the uh, conflicts and tensions that the filmmaker and the scriptwriter wanted to um, deal with, grapple with, and narrativize. I don't know, Samartha, what do you think?
Yeah, Samvartha, do you want to come in? Yeah.
I will not let me stay silent. Okay, no, I mean, it's a very interesting question that we asked. Why is an able person in the center? Yeah, I mean, as rightly and very sharply and what it does is exactly flips. I mean, there's a certain subversion that's happening over here. See, usually, I mean, we kind of tend to create these characters. See, I mean, there's a tendency in writing, and this is something that we discuss even in our screenwriting classes. We introduce a Muslim character because the Muslim identity becomes the point of conflict. Disabled character because disability becomes the point of conflict. So conflict is the pulse for any story. So I mean, when you actually kind of here, I mean, the disability of these characters, the entire thing is not the conflict of the story. The conflict is in the able person. And that is a very interesting thing. One of the things which actually kind of we discussed in the class as well, that when disability studies takes this approach of human first, right? I mean, viewing all of those intellectually disabled people who form the team as human first. I mean, their disability was just a part of their life, and it was not a point of conflict for the narrative. And nor was it actually kind of was it the most defining thing of their existence. So that being shifted, the conflict being shifted from disability to actually kind of the able person. That was a very, a very refreshing thing, and it was a very revolutionary thing as well. In addition to, these things, the other thing, which, the comedy, and I personally, enjoyed this film a lot. And usually, we do not actually tend to see, it's a partially, a part of our imagination of the able people that probably disabled people do not have a very a joyful life. No, there is joy. When you actually, it's so, refreshing. It actually, the film moves us so deeply because, we have not thought probably, we in the sense of the able people. It's hard to imagine that a film on disability, people, film around disabled people can be joyful, can be enjoyable, as Murali Krishna sir was mentioning, it is briefly. So those shifts which are happening in this film, those subversions are extremely important. And also, again, why, I mean, does, see, uh, the normalization need not actually happen just by, will not happen only through representation. Okay. But disabled people living a normal life where disability, a narrative where disability is not the point of conflict. That is not the issue that is being dealt with, but something else. So then actually, a certain normalization can actually kind of occur. And I think Champions does that in a very brilliant and a very human and a very lively man. I think that's the merit of this film. And also the other thing which I actually would like to come with someone point out, again, which was mentioned even by Lily sir, that no character in the film, it seems normal in any way. So there is one or the other, there is a, a rough edge, or a certain eccentricity or something which is not what an ideally we would call as normal. So that is a very interesting thing. No, I think only the wife characters are more or less like a PK. It's a chiseled out quite well kind of character, or it's all the other characters. Be it Marco, be it this actually kind of friend, everyone, there is something which is actually kind of there's a flaw, or there is a shortcoming, something which is so there. It challenges the idea of normalcy in a very interesting way. Not only, it's not actually kind of just looking at people in able, disabled, that kind of framework itself, but it's challenging the very idea of normalcy itself. That is a very interesting thing for me. Especially, since I tend to look at most of the films and through the lens of a screenplay, the character construction becomes very interesting. And also, so it's not the, see, the characters need not actually prove that despite being disabled, they are capable or something like that. So, the onus is not on them to prove anything. They are just being themselves. The whole responsibility falls on the shoulder of this able person to change his perspective, and that's a very interesting. So it's not that the disabled team, people, the team of disabled people, which is actually kind of have to establish that they're worthy of anything. But it's the the other person who has to actually kind of become worthy of what to say, something. And also it's very interesting as to how the entire disabled team, they, there is no, they do not discriminate this person. They do, there is so much of what's acceptance that doesn't come easily from the other side. That's also very interesting perspective to actually kind of look at. Yeah, maybe I think I should stop there. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you for the questions, for the responses. Anyone else who wants to come in now? Yeah, I too thought that this film is not about coaching a set of disabled people. It is about deconstructing what an ostensibly able-bodied person is, and also more importantly, the values that he holds on to. Notions of success, notions of supremacy and competitiveness, and this race for behind certain achievements. So in some ways, I thought the film is deconstructing the values that Marco stands for, and it's about him learning. Yes, I think in a way, Dr. Madhavi is right. So it is about using a set of characters to make it a story of his transformation. But this is not about him transforming and just gaining Sonia and becoming a better person, but also I think a very distinct change in the framing of what stands for the values that this character supposedly believes in. So in a sense, it's a shift in the value system that is being demanded here, where he is taken as an instance. Like, for instance, as Aravinda was saying right at the beginning, the way in which he kind of dismisses people who show any kind of flaw, or who cannot perform at the level that he expects. The way he calls, the person who gives him a ticket, I think he calls him a cretin, or even later, I think, should I teach these, set of cretins, I think is what he says. So the way he looks down upon people who he thinks cannot perform at a certain optimal level. And then through the process where he is called upon to see himself and his own disability that he has kind of, not reflected upon his height, that he is short. I thought all that comes in, very well in the film. So it is a film illustrative of the theme of cinemability, which is to kind of deconstruct this ableism, which we hanker for, and which is a value which we treasure. Not really seeing that there are various kinds of disabilities which we are all living with and battling and embracing. But when it's pointed out as, something that is characteristic of only some kind of people, then that seems to be a problem. Thanks, Samvarta, for a wonderful film. Yes, it was really easy and fun watching. We've had difficult films to watch, in some of the recent weeks, but this was a great watch. Also very thought-provoking, and a great film to set the tone for this entire festival. Anyone else who wants to come in?
No, I just wanted to thank both Nikhila and Geeta and Samvarta for making this possible. Also, it would be nice if someone could think of or suggest films, say, from Iran. There are very good Iranian filmmakers, Turkish filmmakers who treat disability. It might be interesting, if not for this festival, as a discussion point or film later on sometime for this group,
Sure.
it would be
Yeah.
nice. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, Arvinda, we can have edition 2, 3, no problem. So it
Thank
will
you,
be good to form a body of, film discussion on these films. There is, we have all the time on TFO to do this. No
Thank you.
problem
Thank
at
you
all.
so much.
Yeah. Anyone else who wants to come in now? Yagnashri,
May,
Madhuri.
may I, Professor
Yes.
Nikhila? Just
Please
one
go
point,
ahead.
just one point. Taking a cue
Please go
from Dr. Arvinda's words, I think recently, after watching this film, I remembered the film which I saw in the recently concluded Bangalore International Film Festival. It's a Kannada film, Mikka Bannada Hakki, titled Mikka Bannada Hakki, meaning a bird of a different hue, or a different colored bird. In that film, of course, it's not having disability as a theme, but it has the subject of albinism, that color pigmentation, no, leukoderma. The protagonist of the film is 11 to 12-year-old girl, and no, the interesting point here is also the character is not depicted from the angle of victimhood. And also, an interesting aspect of this film is whenever she travels to the school by bus, she recounts the experiences, the adverse experiences, or somewhat unpalatable experiences she encounters in her school life by speaking to herself. That is, she recounts her experiences by speaking to herself. So that, I think, has been used as a coping mechanism for all these things, for the albinism she suffers, or things of that sort. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Yagnashri, Madhurima, Sridhar. Tarkeshwar?
No, I have nothing much to add to the discussion, and some of the large issues that Samvartha raised in the beginning that we can visit at the end of the festival, I think, when we discuss the last film. So, but somewhere we all have in our mind an ideal way of portraying the quote unquote the disability or the disabled on screen. And we are trying to measure these films to that. Or we are trying to form that model by watching this movie or trying to construct this movie as that model. That's what I thought slightly problematic. Without having any of that in mind, if we can discuss the films, and that would be great, I thought. Thank you.
Okay.
If
Yeah,
can I come in on
Aravinda,
that?
yeah, go ahead.
No, I would say that uh, uh, this is more than the ideal way of portraying disability. I mean, if that is a utopian goal, for cinematic representation, there is that element, I'm sure. But the point is that uh, the more important issue for persons with disabilities and disability studies is that persons with disabilities are not portrayed stereotypically and negatively as less than able-bodied people, as less than human. Is there an ideal way to portray the disabled? I don't think so. Are there ideal human beings? I don't think so. But the more important issue for me, at least, is that disabled people are not made the butt of jokes, that they are not portrayed negatively as pitiful, pitiable creatures who become opportunities for the able-bodied to save, to to rescue. So that is more important, I think. If there an ideal way of portraying the disabled characters, I would say not, but I would not rule out that utopian ideal as well. Maybe it does creep up once in a while in disability studies. It's like, it's like uh, the goal of egalitarianism that communism has, right? We all, I mean, those of us who have that persuasion, we somewhere have that dream of equality, right?
So thank you, Arvind, for that intervention. Yeah, there is no utopian thing, but somehow all of us tend to think that there is something, and then we try to measure up. Even when we say that uh, portrayed negatively, stereotype, these also think that there is a non-stereotype representation. Uh, there are two or three ways of looking at it. Uh, because this is a narrative text, one is a representation of the character per se. That is one thing. And then the character comes as part of the larger plot structure and how the plot unfolds and where it get culminates. So that's how it acquires the meaning, not simply by representation of a particular character. The representation of a particular character works towards it. In this movie, I thought there is an ambiguity. And yes, here is a man who has been punished, and to redeem himself, hesitatingly takes up this punishment, and he has his own apprehensions about it, but finally he himself gives to it. So in that sense, and he makes that team come together as team, because that was the objective, not to win the championship. Uh, that was the task that was given to him. But he wanted them to win the championship. But these two again go hand in hand. So becoming a team and then winning together. If you're losing, you don't become a team. One person who was not part of the team earlier, he joins the team later on. Though there is a backstory to why he did not join the team, he has some problem with the coaches. But when the team is winning, he comes back to the team. So in that sense, forming the team and then winning, they go hand in hand. I think that is also well established. So one he is helping them. That aspect is also there in the narrative. But as others have also pointed out, um, these people helping that protagonist to achieve some kind of completeness is also there. In fact, the person who did not join the team initially, when the world coach comes and asks him, how is he doing? He says that we are able to train him properly. So in that sense, they are also helping him to train. So it's a kind of ambiguity. Both sides it is happening. So he is also helping them, and they are also helping them. So in that sense, uh, they are also in need of help, and this fellow is also in need of help. So in that sense, the movie is balancing it very well. So instead of looking at it as stereotype or bad representation, to what end it works out, how the narrative unfolds, where the narrative gets culminated, and sometimes the filmmaker himself or herself or the team which is making the movie is not taking certain decisions, or even if they're taking the certain decisions, there are larger discourses, the industry discourses, the which compel them to take certain decisions, unwittingly or unknowingly. So we need to unearth those compulsions too by watching these films, watching these movies, rather than simply bifurcating or classifying what kinds of representations are there, whether it's good or bad, or whether it's inspirational or victimhood, or they're represented simply as like any other human being. So instead of characterizing, we need to unfold what are the factors that influence these discourses, which portrays, which represent them in a particular way on screen. And then the other factor is how do people receive it? That is a different issue altogether. There is a representation. That representation can be taken positively, can be taken negatively. When when do we take it positively? When do we take it negatively? Is a different issue altogether. I will not get into that. But it was a good discussion, and the movie was very apt to initiate the discussion on this. Thank you very much for that.
Okay. Anyone else who wants to come in? Any further responses?
If there is nobody, I'd like to say one thing there.
Please go ahead. Please go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, of course, we can talk about this in the next few weeks also, but recently I happened to read this book called Blind Rage, Letters to Helen Keller. This is by this disability studies and literary scholar called Georgina Klieg. She's an American professor, and she writes these letters to Helen Keller, the deaf-blind woman who did a lot for the rights of the blind, right, in America. So uh, one or two films were made in the first half of the 20th century on Helen Keller and her teacher, Anne Sullivan. It's a very famous story, no? So these films were made, and Helen Keller was portrayed as being rescued by her teacher, and this narrative becomes very it is a tearjerker, and they were although the film became a flop, evidently that's what I remember reading in the book. As Professor Tarakesha was saying, why are disabled characters portrayed in such certain ways, be they negative or positive or whatever? The larger discourse is obviously one is profitability, isn't it? To how to make a film profitable. So for people in the disability studies sector, the discipline, for us, this is a major problem that profitability comes because disabled characters are portrayed uh, i- in accordance with the larger societal narrative of their being unfortunate and people who will be rescued by the able body. Unfortunately, the larger discourse as far as the people with disabilities is concerned, it is more or less uh, driven by pity and charity, repulsion. These are the major. Of course, there are people, able-bodied people uh, who understand the disabled without being uh, you know coached or trained to instinctively. And there's this public intellectual in the US called Mia Mingus. She talks about access intimacy, how certain able-bodied people are, they intuitively understand the disabled. Okay, so such people are there, but unfortunately, the larger discourse as far as portrayal of disability is concerned is driven by ableist norms. I don't know. Maybe I'm coming from a very, disability studies academic perspective, but this is what I think. Thank you.
Okay. Any words from Shreya and Adishri before we conclude? Any last comments from you, Shreya and Adishri, or anyone else before we conclude the discussion?
I think most of what we discussed in class and probably more has been covered. I don't really have much to add. I think it was a very cohesive and sort of circular discussion. So I feel like we really revisited a lot of different themes, and I did gain a lot of new perspective. Like I said, we did it within the perspective of disability studies, but through the discussions, there was a lot of ideas about narrative that we didn't really take into account. We were most focused on the narrative of the disabled to really understand the entire, or like what the narrative within the film was. But yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, Shreya?
Similar to what Adishi said, I think we've had very fruitful discussions through this panel, and everything that people had to say, mostly I agree with. And even in class, when it was all of us, I think because every person was raising their own individual points, I think that's when we that's when we started to connect all of the dots and kind of come to like a cohesive sort of perspective while having varied individual perspectives in a sense. So I think that's also the beauty about visual media, that it's perceived in different ways, and there's always more to add about narratives or themes or the use of genre or authorship or intentional directorial choices and ones that are not intentional. So I think just having this forum to sort of talk about it and deliberate and discuss was very, very helpful. So I'd like to thank you for organizing that and for asking us to be a part of it.
Okay. And Arvinda and Samvartha, anything to say about today before we conclude?
I've said too much already. Thank you.
Okay. Samvartha?
Stop pulling me into this. I come here to learn from others. So yeah, I'm really grateful for the new perspectives that they have. Thank you, everyone. Especially Adishri and Shreya, shaping this very sharp discussion. Thank you.
Okay. So if there are no more points, then let us conclude this Saturday's discussion. First of all, thanks Aravinda, Samvartha, and special thanks to Adishri and Shreya It was wonderful. We don't usually have students like you who've had classroom engagement and discussions. It's quite unusual for TFO to have young people like you and your perspectives on the forum. I think today's discussion has kind of told us maybe we should do more of this. So thank you so much for introducing the film and being part of this discussion. You're welcome not only throughout this May for all the other discussions, but every time we have a discussion on Saturday, you can come back if it's a film that interests you. Thank you to all those who joined the discussion this evening. We will meet next Saturday with another film as part of this Cinemability Festival. As I told Ravinda, we'll have this festival now, and there is nothing to stop us from maybe 6 months later having edition 2 of the same. So let's hope that this discussion around cinema continues in this way. Thank you all very much.
Thank
and have
you.
a very good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank
See you
you.
next week.
Thank you.